In Moscow say hundreds of Ukrainian drones have targeted the city in what appears to be the largest attack on the Russian capital so far in the war.
Russian officials say 3 people have been killed in the Moscow region in one of the largest ever Ukrainian drone attacks on the Russian capital.
Russia in flames. The deadlocked front line between ceasefire, peace and war has flared up as Ukrainian missiles and drones flew into Russian cities. Hundreds of Ukrainian drones and cruise missiles with a range of 1,000 kilometers set Russian cities in flames for hours. The ceasefire talks were not reciprocated by Russia, which had a harsh repercussion in Kiev. Ukraine sent a direct message to Putin by launching a massive wave of drone attacks targeting Russia's industrial centers. Moreover, a new Ukrainian cruise missile with a range of 1,000 kilometers appeared and directly targeted Russian major industrial facilities. These attacks, which hit 7 different regions of Russia, are a clear intimidation for the Kremlin. But can Ukraine's harsh response change Putin's stance? Which critical points were hit by these attacks? Will Russia launch a new wave of attacks in retaliation? Or will peace talks reach a complete deadlock? Let us look at how Ukraine is using Russia's critical industrial facilities as a testing ground for its new 1,000-kilometer range cruise missiles. Then we will detail the intense rain of attacks that brought a half-day of dark clouds over Russian cities. On March 15, 2025, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine had successfully extended the range of its domestically produced Neptune cruise missile to 1,000 kilometers. The Ukrainian leader confirmed that the improved Long Neptune missile has already been tested and successfully deployed in combat operations, hitting targets with pinpoint accuracy. We have achieved significant results, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday. Long Neptune was tested and successfully used in combat. It is a new Ukrainian missile, an accurate strike. Its range is 1,000 kilometers, that is 620 miles. The successful deployment of the Long Neptune Zelensky mentioned was apparently the March 14 attack on the oil refinery in Tuapse, Russia, about 300 miles from the front line in Ukraine. Satellite images of the oil refinery in Tuapse, Russia, where a fire is still burning after the Neptune cruise missile and drone attack have been published on the internet. The refinery is known to process 12 million tons of oil a year, more than 90% of which is exported and used to supply the Russian military. The Tuapse attack was the latest in a series of Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil installations, which last year reduced production by about 10%. The Long Neptune is a longer version of Ukraine's 17-meter-long Neptune anti-ship cruise missile. It was the truck-launched weapon that sank the Russian Black Sea Fleet flagship Moskva in April 2022. Longer than the 120-mile-long standard Neptune and holding more fuel, the Long Neptune has been in development for years. When Zelensky recently pledged that Ukraine would produce 100,000 long-range munitions in 2025, he was referring in part to the Long Neptune, but also to a series of long-range explosive drones, the most impressive of which can travel more than 1,000 miles to hit targets deep inside Russia. The Long Neptune is an important weapon. The new missile, which hits harder than do-it-yourself attack drones, some of which are modified sports planes, helps Ukraine break free from its partial dependence on the United States and Europe for the best deep strike munitions. The United States, under President Donald Trump, is an unreliable ally at best, and Europe lacks the capacity to produce the large number of modern cruise missiles that Ukraine needs. Other Ukrainian-made munitions are coming, including air-launched gliding bombs and ground-launched ballistic missiles. While Trump is pressuring Ukraine to accept a possible United States-mediated ceasefire that would favor Russia, Zelensky's government is preparing for the war to continue and for attacks deep inside Russia to continue or even escalate. Moreover, the Russian Telegram news channel Astra, citing its sources, claimed that a Ukrainian long-range Neptune missile hit the Aksinino oil pumping station of the Bryansk Regional Division of Transneft Druzhba in the Karachevsky district of Bryansk Oblast on March 10, although the extent of the damage is not yet known. Another major wave of attacks in recent days was the 11-hour raid that set 7 Russian cities ablaze. Ukraine's drone fleet carried out a massive attack, hitting facilities in Kaluga, Saratov, Voronezh, Tambov, Rostov, Belgorod and Moscow regions. The attack began at 8 in the morning and lasted for about 11 hours. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed that 77 drones were captured and destroyed. In the Kaluga region, according to Governor Vladislav Shapsha, 25 drones were shot down. One of the downed drones crashed into an industrial facility in the Dzhinsky district, causing a fire. As a result of the attack, an employee was slightly injured and received medical assistance. The area is home to the first plant oil refinery, which was previously attacked in May last year. Shapsha also reported damage to a communications tower and power lines in Kvastovitsky district. In the Saratov region, Lyuty kamikaze drones damaged non-residential premises in the Petrovsky district. According to preliminary reports, there were no casualties. Local residents reported based on video footage that the Gazovaya electricity substation in the Prigorodny settlement was hit. Ukrainian sources said the target was the main gas pipeline's Petrovsk Line production plant, which is responsible for gas transportation between Saratov and Penza regions, and has 5 compressor workshops. In the published footage, the drone is seen diving towards the plant, while workers and passers-by watch and record the incident. There is then an explosion as Lyuty's warhead detonates and smoke rises. The Petrovsk main gas pipeline's linear production control center is a subsidiary of PJSC Gazprom. It is responsible for transporting natural gas in 7 directions and supplying gas to settlements in the Saratov and Penza regions. The facility is located 600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The control center consists of 21 structural subdivisions and serves 1,044 kilometers of pipeline. The presence of 5 compressor workshops and powerful gas pumping units ensures the transportation of up to 90 million cubic meters of gas per day. Former Ukrainian Deputy Interior Minister Anton Gerashchenko said that the facilities had been hit. Indirectly supporting this claim, the Russian Federal Air Transport Agency suspended flights at Saratov and Penza airports. Rostov, a drone strike in the Sholokovsky district, caused a fire at an enterprise in the Kalininsky hamlet. According to the head of the region, Yuri Slyusar, only the grass around the enterprise caught fire, and the facility itself was not damaged. Tambov, the gas compressor station in Davidovskia, was hit by drones. Footage posted on social networks shows drones hitting industrial equipment at the stations and violent explosions. Near the village of Radkovka in the Belgorod region, drones attacked a field warehouse where missiles for the S-300 or S-400 missile system were stored. After the strike, active detonation of the ammunition began. In the Voronezh region, drones struck an infrastructure facility in the southern part of the region, causing a fire. According to the regional governor Alexander Gusev, 2 infrastructure facilities were damaged, but the names of the attacked facilities are being kept secret. On the other hand, the most striking location of the attack was the capital Moscow. It is known that a fire broke out at thermal power plant number 16 on Tretya Horoshevskaya Street in Moscow. The fire broke out on the roof of an 8-story building. As the Russians noted, emergency responders are being dispatched to the scene. Images posted on the internet show that the fire is quite large. Eyewitnesses are broadcasting images of black smoke rising above the thermal power plant site. Ukraine's deadly drone strikes are targeting critical Russian facilities one by one, and Moscow is clearly failing to stop them. While the Kremlin claims that its air defense systems are operating at full capacity, the reality is very different. Russian air defenses are failing to detect and destroy Ukraine's small but highly effective drones. As the attacks continue unabated, sirens, explosions, and clouds of smoke have become part of everyday life in Russian cities. Russians, who once only followed the war on the news, now feel the heat of war directly in their homes. It is now clear that there is no safe place even inside Russia. Moreover, Ukraine's strategy of cross-border aggression is pushing Russia to the brink of collapse. The Russian economy, as has often been noted, is struggling with interest rates in excess of 20% amid rising inflation and manpower shortages made critical by the war. The state of the economy is dire. This is partly because the military budget accounts for 40% of all public spending, and partly because oil revenue has been affected by low prices, the Ukraine offensive, and tightening sanctions. Russian weakness is particularly evident in the military. In 2024 alone, the Russians lost 1,400 main battle tanks and more than 3,700 infantry fighting vehicles and armoured personnel carriers. At the same time, Russian production of such vehicles, including refurbished units, was only 4,300, not enough to compensate for their losses. In desperation, Russia turned to restoring the oldest and most ineffective combat vehicles, most of which were Soviet-made. We can say that the Russian military-industrial complex is ill-equipped to cope with the effects of a protracted war against Ukraine or to achieve a sustainable future in terms of production, innovation, and development. The same is true for Russian manpower. In the spring and summer of 2024, the number of soldiers the Russians were able to keep on the front line seemed to have peaked at over 650,000. By the end of the year, it had fallen to close to 600,000, despite the extraordinary bonuses offered by the Russian government to new recruits, which in 2023 amounted to about 2.5 times the average Russian annual salary. Russian casualties have steadily increased. According to the British Ministry of Defence, they were about 500 per day in December 2022, just under 1,000 in December 2023, and over 1,500 in December 2024. In 2024 alone, Russia inflicted nearly 430,000 dead and wounded, compared to just over 250,000 in 2023. North Korean reinforcements have received media attention, but these troops, at most in the tens of thousands, cannot compensate for the fundamental shortfalls in Russian manpower. Moreover, the high attrition rates experienced by the Russians mean that the Russian army has been unable to rebuild. An increasingly primitive force, poorly trained and managed, is pushed forward only by fear. The pause in American aid over the past year has hurt Ukraine, but now stockpiles appear to be in better shape for most types of weapons. Ukraine's own production has reached impressive levels in certain vital categories, especially drones. In 2024, the Ukrainian military received more than 1.2 million Ukrainian-made UAVs, which is twice as many as Ukraine had at the beginning of the war, let alone produced. Ukrainian production rates are still rising. Kiev aims to produce 4 million drones this year alone. UAVs are vital as they replace artillery as the most effective system on the battlefield. According to one estimate, UAVs now account for 70% of Russian casualties. Ukraine's robust defence industry is innovating faster and more effectively than Russia and its allies. Wars of attrition take place on many fronts. For example, it is true that Russia has increased its attacks on Ukrainian industrial and civilian targets and energy infrastructure. But Ukrainian air defences have been remarkably successful in neutralising the vast majority of these attacks. Civilian casualties in Ukraine are therefore declining. Moreover, Ukraine has also been on the offensive. It has produced around 6,000 long-range heavy UAVs, which it has used to strike deep inside Russia, reducing Russian oil production. Remarkably, Ukraine appears to be moving at the same pace as Russia in the rate at which it is producing its own similar drone, the Shahed, produced under license from Iran. Despite American reluctance to provide more assistance, Ukraine's European friends can make a significant difference, even if they cannot simply replace what the United States provides. For example, they do not produce the advanced Patriot anti-missile system, but they do have other capable air defense weapons. One of these weapons is the NASAMS air defense systems. As of the end of February 2025, NASAMS has proven to be an extraordinarily effective air defense system for Ukraine, especially in thwarting Russian missile and drone attacks. According to Colonel Per Steinar Treut, head of the Norwegian Air Force's Ukraine Support Department, NASAMS systems deployed in Ukraine have achieved an effectiveness rate of 94%. Colonel Troit detailed the significant impact of NASAMS, saying that it has successfully intercepted more than 900 cruise missiles and drones. More than 60% of these targets were cruise missiles, which are very difficult to defend against. This means that the KH-101, Kaliber, and Iskander-K missiles also failed to evade NASAMS. This level of effectiveness, combined with the high volume of intercepted threats, highlights the precision and reliability of the NASAMS air defense missile system in countering Russian missile and drone attacks. The system's ability to shoot down more than 900 air threats with a 94% success rate is a remarkable achievement in modern warfare and represents a significant advance in Ukraine's ability to protect its airspace and critical infrastructure. Europe, on the other hand, can help Ukraine move forward with more UAV production. Europeans have the capacity to produce engines for long-range UAVs at a much higher rate, and some European systems that have not yet been procured could increase Ukraine's advantages. Germany has so far refused Ukraine the Taurus, which is far more effective, has greater range, and carries a heavier payload than the Franco-British Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles. The new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has said he will send Taurus missiles to Ukraine if the Russians do not give in. The Taurus KEPD 350 is a German-Swedish cruise missile fired from fighter jets with a maximum range of 500 kilometers. It can travel at a maximum speed of around 1,170 kilometers per hour and at a height of only 35 meters. This makes it very difficult for radar systems to detect. The Taurus missile will penetrate behind enemy lines more than any long-range Western missile in Ukraine's arsenal, increasing Ukraine's ability to deter Russian aggression and respond effectively to multiple threats. With these systems, Ukraine could add to the significant damage it has already inflicted inside Russia. Corrosive campaigns are based on an industrial basis. The GDP of the European Union alone is about 10 times that of Russia. And if you add the United Kingdom and Norway to this account, the imbalance in favour of Ukraine grows even larger. Currently, Europe and the United States provide Ukraine with approximately equal amounts of their military resources, while Ukraine has produced 40% on its own. The United States has not only provided military supplies, it has also provided intelligence and access to Starlink internet services. None of this can be easily compensated. Nevertheless, one should not underestimate the depth of technological and intelligence resources available from Europe and sympathetic Asian countries. Ukraine is not on the brink of collapse, and it is Russia, not Ukraine, that is losing the war of attrition. But Vladimir Putin continues to cautiously stack conditions for any ceasefire. Still, there are reasons to think that the Russian leader could be forced to accept the deal. Take, for example, the recent news about Gazprom's economic woes. The Russian gas giant is considering selling some of its key real estate in St. Petersburg and is also planning a significant reduction in its workforce. While Russia is well prepared to withstand Western sanctions for a long time, it cannot do so indefinitely, and Moscow is starting to feel the economic strain. Trump knows this and has said this week that if Russia rejects the ceasefire agreement, he will do financial things that will be very bad for Russia. That will be devastating for Russia. The Russian pipeline network on which Putin's war machine relies has been designed for more than 40 years to supply oil to Western and Central Europe. But these arteries are drying up. Gazprom's sales through the Urengoy-Pomory-Uzhhorod pipeline ended when it was shut down in December last year. With the additional closure of the Nord Stream and Yamal pipelines, Gazprom's only remaining route to transport gas to Europe is through Turkey, using the Turkstream and Bluestream pipelines under the Black Sea. Gazprom's pipeline exports to Europe have fallen by 75%, and the new pipelines still under development, aimed at supplying China and Asia, cannot make up the difference. Even the most ambitious projects to transport gas eastward will not reach half of the previous peak annual exports of 180 billion cubic meters. Moscow expected a quick victory in Ukraine and the resulting temporary disruption of gas trade, as happened with the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Russia undoubtedly thought that exports to Europe would quickly return to normal. This calculation was not entirely unfounded, as until January this year, there were discussions among European Union member states about resuming Russian gas purchases in the event of a ceasefire. Nevertheless, as time passes, Russia's position as one of Europe's main energy suppliers is weakening, and Putin may be overplaying his hand by delaying the ceasefire. Gazprom rivals like Novatek still supply Europe with liquefied natural gas, often in larger quantities than in the past. But the LNG market seems to be heading towards a saturation, with more and more capacity coming online, from the United States to Qatar. While this may take 2 or 3 years to fully materialize, it will greatly weaken Russia's long-term position as an energy exporter. This gas glut will be a problem for Putin. If gas and oil prices collapse because the world is overproducing, it will be even easier for Europeans to find alternatives. This will not solve the problems of the European Union's flawed energy policies, but it will certainly strengthen its position vis-à-vis Russia. Assuming that the Kremlin is aware of these circumstances, we can expect the Russians to remain at the table. Moscow was incredibly lucky that Europe opposed nuclear and fracking as reliable sources of energy. Instead, the European Union waited for the non-Russian world's gas reserves to kick in. The resulting high prices have so incentivized United States and Middle Eastern LNG production that there may be no room for Russia to regain market share. As the ceasefire negotiations continue, Putin will surely assess the precarious situation of the Russian oil and gas industry. Thank you for following us.